Good evening all and welcome. Tonight we're taking a trip down to the basement for our collection of terrifying scary stories. If you enjoy these, don't forget to subscribe and press the bell icon for new stories every week. But for now it's time to get comfortable and let the darkness take control. I worked in a hospital for 7 years. Pretty old and outdated original building with newer additions. I was about to use the set of elevators that are sandwiched in between the old building and the new addition. I get on, push the button to go up a floor or two and everything's fine. Until the elevator starts going down instead of up. I just figured someone called the elevator before I hit the button on my floor, which happens sometimes because they pretty much operated by who pushed it first, you know. Well, the elevator takes me down to the basement level, which is the oldest part of the hospital and happened to house the morgue. Doors open, nobody's there to have called the elevator. Figured whatever, maybe they were impatient and went another way or something. I tried pushing the closed door buttons and nothing happened. The elevator just sat there with the doors open on the basement level. The floor I selected was still lit, but I tried pushing a different floor above us. It lit up just like intended, but it wasn't working. I waited and mashed the buttons for at least 5 minutes, and the doors the whole while stayed open and didn't move, which was unheard of for those doors to stay open. They didn't even have a service switch where you can push to lock the doors open when needed, let alone for the elevator not to be called. It was a commonly used elevator that was always in movement. I decided that it must have broken down and that I didn't have time for this. Well, as soon as I step out the elevator, the doors shut, and the elevator leaves to go to the floors I selected. Something really wanted me to visit them in the basement that night, and wouldn't take no for an answer. My grandmother lived with my parents and I for nearly my entire life. She passed away in her connected basement apartment in 2020. She raised me, so losing her has been very hard. We have noticed some odd things happening in the basement. My sister went down there once, and one of her old clown figurines randomly fell off a shelf. One time I was sitting down there, and all of the ornaments on the Christmas tree just started shaking. I tried speaking to a photo of her on the wall once as a sort of therapy, and the picture illuminated in a sort of way. The time that sticks with me the most was New Year's Eve 2020. I couldn't go anywhere because of the pandemic, so I stayed up late playing video games. I had work very early the next morning, but I kept playing, and I thought to myself that I should go to bed soon, but oh well. Just after that thought came into my head, my game shut off, and I got an error message that I'd never received before and haven't gotten since. Immediately I went to bed. She's still parenting me from beyond the grave. When I was younger, I used to experience a reoccurring dream that was quite unsettling. In the dream, I felt as if someone was placing me in my car seat. Initially, I didn't pay much attention to it, so I remained half asleep, aware of my surroundings as I moved around the house. I can sense myself being taken towards the kitchen and then down the stairs until I was eventually set down in the basement. Upon opening my eyes, I found myself facing towards my sister's room, in the basement. Being a little kid, I got easily scared, so I did what any frightened child would do, and went back to sleep, and woke up in bed the next day. This strange occurrence repeated for a while, though I'm not sure for how long exactly. One day while being carried, I managed to open my eyes and found myself facing the stairs. Uncomfortable with what was happening, I quickly closed my eyes and opened them up again as I reached the basement. As usual, I went back to sleep and woke up in my bed. I couldn't understand why this had kept happening, but one night when I was up late with my sister, I heard a baby's cry coming from the bottom of the stairs. It made me think back through the years, and I realized why I ended up in the basement. I was just a little kid, only 4.5, and it occurred to me that the spirit mistook me for a baby and placed me where the deceased baby had been. It crossed my mind that perhaps it wanted me to suffer the same fate as the baby. It's heartbreaking to know that such a young life was lost. I never told my parents about this, just my two sisters. I'm not actually sure if it was a baby who passed away here. I have no way of finding out, but I just sort of assumed it from the sound. There was a very strong feeling that night, telling me something was about to happen. I felt like I was being watched by a woman, and that at any moment she was going to tap on my shoulder. My brain was thinking of the word queen. I don't know why, but it felt like this woman, whoever she was highly respected in any case. My grandfather moved into a lake house in the US. He lives in a not old but not so new 2-story house with a basement and 4 bedrooms. His house has always creeped me out since the beginning, really. It wasn't that the house looked bad or was in poor condition. It was just that my brain had set itself into fight or flight the moment I passed its threshold. I told myself to quit being a wuss and explore the house, and brushed it off as being nervous. It was a new house in a new city after all, and was much further from his original house in the woods. A good 2 hours probably. I checked the upstairs out and calmed myself down a little bit, while my sister ran off to play with my cousins. I finished looking around the first half of his house and made my way down the stairs towards the basement. It was a fully finished basement, but even with lights, it still felt poorly lit and dark, with uninviting corners. I opened the doors and peeked into all the rooms until one was left in the downstairs living room, the game room. This room was meant for storage and had no windows. Every time someone walked upstairs, you could hear very loud creaking from the bare wooden boards above your head. The lights were a blinding white when on, but as soon as you'd flick the switch, it was pure darkness. If you were to put your right hand in front of your face, you'd not be able to see it. The game room had multiple metal shelves and game boxes laying everywhere. To finish it off, there was a large ping-pong table right smack dab in the middle of the carpet. Being alone in the basement all by myself made me really jumpy, and my senses were all on high alert. A barely audible scratching noise had emitted from the storm room. The longer I sat there, the louder it got, until it exited the room quickly and closed the door behind me. It was impossible for anyone else to be in the room with me. Everyone else was upstairs, and if someone were to enter, I would have heard the creaking above my head. It was creepy as hell. Another time during the summer, when the lake water was warm, my cousin, my sister and I stayed the night to go swimming the next day. We jokingly spoke about how creepy the house was and how funny it would be if a ghost was in the basement. All 3 of us decided to bunk out in the king-size bed in the guest room downstairs. After a while of giggling and pestering, all of us said our goodnights and cuddled up to sleep. Not even 10 minutes later, I heard footsteps outside my room. My grandfather had probably come to check in on us, I thought. Then to my horror, I heard loud snoring from the master bedroom. In fact, it wasn't him. I shook my cousin and sister awake to listen, and they all agreed they heard walking too. My eyes made their way back to the bottom of the door, staring at the little crack. You could visibly see feet shuffling back and forth. Before I could gasp, the feet stopped right in front of our bedroom door, and I held my breath and laid there too terrified to move. They stayed like that for God knows how long, and after a while they began moving back and forth again. It got worse. Soft tapping from the wall behind our bed started up. It was as if someone on the opposite side of the wall was flicking their knuckles against the thin plaster that separated the bedroom from the storm room. All of us hid under our covers and didn't say a word, eventually all passing out from exhaustion. In the morning while sitting at breakfast, I questioned my grandfather about last night, and he told me he had not gotten up to check on us and that he had turned the TV off upstairs and went straight to bed. All of us kids glanced at each other, saying nothing and continued to shove syrupy pancakes into our cheeks. The very last time I had ever experienced something strange in this house was during late summer, with my sister and multiple other cousins. There were around 6 of us. All of us wanted to play hide and seek in his large house, and, as I was the eldest, I was seeking first. One by one I found all my cousins. The only person left was my sister, and all my cousins had agreed to help me search for her around the house. I tried looking in the closet again in the basement, but it was glued shut. In frustration, I began rattling it, trying to pry the door open. I couldn't remember if I had a lock on or not. I loudly knocked on the door and ordered my sister to come out since I'd found her. After 20 seconds of silence, I tried again. By now, I was beginning to become pissed off. All 4 cousins joined in helping me open the door, but it wouldn't budge. Making our way upstairs to ask my grandfather to open the door, my sister jumped out from behind a vase and scared us all. I angrily asked her why she locked the door to the closet, and she gave me a confused look and informed me she had no clue what I was talking about and that she had been in her current hiding spot the whole time. She laughed as she bragged about us walking past her at least 5 different times, but stopped after watching the colour all drain from our face. Only then did she understood what happened. Every time we stay over at my grandfather's, we always bring up stories and talk about them. All of my cousins believe his basement, if not the whole house, is haunted. What do you think? I used to work in a hotel as a security guard. The building was built in 1922 and it had a basement. One night the front desk clerk, the valet, and I are just hanging out in the lobby chatting when the phone rings. The phone call was coming from the basement where the offices are. At the time, there isn't supposed to be anyone there. I'd already locked the doors and made sure that no one was there. The front desk picks up the phone and heard a very strange sound and was then disconnected. It gives me chills to the bones. The valet guy and I went down to make sure that no one was trespassing. The doors were still locked and didn't see anyone coming out, so we went inside to the office. The only thing we found is the phone blinking, and it looked like someone had picked it up and dropped it. The valet and I looked at each other and saw the cold sweat on our faces. It still to this day is one of the creepiest things that happened to me while working graveyard security. My friend wanted to renovate their basement, and the first step was replacing their bulkhead stairs. His daughter was probably 4 years old at the time, and they needed to keep an eye on her, so we set her up with some toys in the basement while we were working. As we were cutting the stair treads to size outside, we heard his daughter laughing and talking and assumed she was just playing with her dolls. Around lunchtime, we took a break and went into the basement and asked my friend's daughter what game she was playing. She mentioned that Nana had come to visit and she was showing her her dolls. I should mention that my friend's grandmother, who owned the house, had passed away a few years before his daughter was born and had never met her. There were still a few boxes of her possessions in the basement that the family had decided not to get rid of. Whether it be ghost or child's imagination, I'll let you decide. Nonetheless, it gave me the shivers. Between the ages of 10 and 15, we lived in this extremely old house. My parents bought it when it was a fresh 98 years old, and we were only the 4th family to ever live in it. The old couple before did seem eager to get out of there. My bedroom was the smallest room upstairs at the end of the hall. The attic door was in my bedroom, so no one could have come in or out. My father had told me that I would sleepwalk in that house. I would walk down the hall or into their room and say things like, "Don't you see this book I'm reading?" and "Maisie wants to play." They were creeped out but chalked it up to sleepwalking. However, it was never an issue before or after this house. but it was consistent while we lived there. In my room, I was laying in my bed, and I heard 6 loud bangs in the attic. They were fast-paced and directly above my bed. My first time hearing it, I was so freaked out I ran out of the room, but my parents convinced me it was probably a squirrel. The second time I heard it, I went right into my twin brother's room and slept in his bunk beds. I wouldn't sleep in my room anymore. One night I had a few girlfriends over, and I was telling them about these 6 bangs in the attic, and literally as I was talking about it, it happened. I remember going, "See?" because no one believed me. They were petrified, and one of them even went home straight after. When we were moving out the house, weird stuff started happening. Doors would slam shut. One door slammed shut so hard, all of the pots and pans fell down from across the hooks. Boxes would fall over, pans would fly across the room, and our dog was constantly barking and whimpering. I always wondered why it got more intense when we were moving. I still live in my hometown, and a new family lives in that house. Any time I've driven by it, there's a guy who hangs out on the porch, and I always want to ask them if anything weird happens, but I don't want to freak them out either. This story happened in the early 2000s. Both of my parents are adamant skeptics, and yet none of them can explain away what exactly happened this fateful afternoon. Allow me to elaborate. Me and my family had just gotten out of our car and were staring at the movable truck. We had just moved from the city into a more suburban area, and it was the first time in my life I was going to get my own bedroom. My sister and I, finally, were going to have our own space, which was very welcome indeed. The house had a ground level room, one upstairs, and a very large basement. I went into the house first and ran up the stairs wanting to investigate all the rooms. I was determined to pick the best one for myself. I went up the stairs and liked the look of the room. I went down to the one on the ground floor and thought to myself that my parents would probably end up with this one as it had an ensuite bathroom. But then I went down the stairs into the basement, and when I made it down, the space, although not very well lit, seemed perfect for all my needs. I could see where I was going to put a recliner chair, where I could put the foosball table, a TV, and my GameCube, and a perfect spot for my bed. It was in that moment I decided I was going to have my way and get the basement room. I ran upstairs as fast as I could to inform my parents and my sister that I had taken dibs. When I got up there, I was surprised to see that my parents were all in the kitchen with my sister, and walking up the driveway was my Uncle Alan. "Hey, what are you doing here?" I asked. "Oh, just thought I'd help out," he replied, and came downstairs with me to the basement as we were making conversation. He wasn't actually doing much. In retrospect, I thought he was helping me move boxes, but he was just kind of standing there and nodding to everything I was saying. When it came time to go upstairs to grab a few more of my things, he walked up the stairs with me, and my mum noticed him straight away, as it was her brother. She says, "Hey Alan," and they start having a conversation, and he idles in the kitchen for a while I go and grab one of the boxes. Just as I come back to the kitchen to see how everyone is, they ask if I'd like a cup of tea, to which I accept. Strangely enough, Uncle Alan respectfully declines and says that he isn't very thirsty right now, but that maybe another time. This is odd as he's a prolific tea drinker. In fact, they only really asked knowing he'd want one to begin with. I go downstairs, organize a few of my things, thinking where I'm going to put them, and then make my way back up. I get given a tea, and just sit in the kitchen for a minute, enjoying the view out into the garden, the first one I've ever got to experience for myself. As I'm talking to my family, I ask where Uncle Alan is. My mum says she assumed he went to help with the boxes. She says it's funny because she didn't know that he knew that today was our moving day, but was pretty happy for the help. My dad comes in with another box, and that's when I asked Dad if he saw where Alan had gone. With Alan being a grown man, we assumed he just had other business to attend to, and maybe it was a quick visit, even though he didn't say goodbye, which was strange in itself, but we kind of played it off. Later that afternoon, my mom had gotten pizza, and as we were eating it at the house, suddenly she gets a phone call. She's the only person with a mobile phone in the family, and as she picks up, she hears nothing but crying and hysteric screaming on the other end of the line. She tries to calm down my grandma, who's on the other end of the line, and after a small conversation, my mum starts saying, "No, that's not right. That's impossible." You see, at 8 in the morning, while he had been driving to work in the city we had just moved from, he had been driving through a traffic light while it was green for him, when a lorry went straight through the red light and smashed into him, obliterating his car and killing him pretty much instantly. My grandmother had only just found out, and as you can imagine, was absolutely losing it. My mum was incredulous. She said that must be wrong. Alan had been here for about 20 minutes at about 10 o'clock this morning. It was impossible. My dad, my sister, and myself all saw and spoke with him. But as the day went on, it became ever more real that what happened had actually happened. Talk about the worst start to moving to a new house. My parents were called to go inspect the mangled remains of my uncle and confirm it was him, as my grandmother just couldn't look at her son in that horrific way. My parents came back visibly shaken. None of us spoke about what happened. All the plans for the move were kind of put on pause, and about a month later, after the funeral and once we've managed to organize the house, did we manage to actually have a conversation when we were having dinner one evening. My dad started by asking if we could confirm if we all saw Alan, and every one of us explained what we had spoken about with him and how and where we'd seen him. That was definitely a very disturbing time of our lives, but the story does not end there. As that very night, as I was going down to my basement room, I turned on my game and was playing for about half an hour when I thought I heard a creaking on the stairs. I turned my head and there was no one there. After a while I started to get tired, switched my game off, brushed my teeth, and made my way into bed, listening to the darkness and nature outside my window. It was just as I was getting to sleep that I think I see movement out of the corner of my eye, so I groggily start opening my eyes just to see who is there. Light is feeding through the basement window, lighting up a portion of the room. And just as I look around the room, telling myself I see nothing, and try and go back to sleep, do I hear my uncle say, "Goodbye, Sam." I just about crapped my pants, ran up the stairs and slept on the sofa. I never told my family, because I knew they wouldn't believe me. As an electrician that specializes in older buildings, I have a lot of work in Texas and New Mexico, and had a fair share of encounters with the paranormal. One building in particular certainly left its mark on me. It was 2019 when I first set foot in this structure, and my co-workers told me tales about their encounters in the basement that immediately caught my attention. Well, during one incident, my colleagues were diligently working on electrical metal tubing in the basement, coordinating their efforts while perched on ladders. Amidst their focus, a bundle of pipes on the floor seemed to mysteriously get kicked. Startled, they exchanged glances, confirming that they were alone in the building. The heavy and noisy basement doors made any unnoticed entry or exit highly unlikely, leading them to question the inexplicable occurrence. Initially skeptical, I found myself reconsidering my stance after a series of inexplicable events. The turning point came during a late-night shutdown operation. As we completed the disconnection of main power, I was double-checking tools and turning off lights at around 2:30 a.m. Ascending the stairs from the basement, once a blast door, I heard a whisper, "Hey," directly behind my right ear. The chilling sensation of the whispered word, accompanied by a subtle breeze on the back of the head, prompted an instinctive and rapid exit from the scene. My hasty departure, exclaiming about the whispered encounter, garnered amused looks from my co-workers who had evidently experienced something similar. In another incident that same week, during a building watch, my journeyman and I decided to wait on the first floor, settling into a comfortable spot. I found myself next to the equipment, requiring constant AC due to the scorching temperatures outside. As I savored the breeze, a pen inexplicably dropped near my head. Investigating the origin, I discovered a dust ring, perfectly shaped like the fallen pen, prompting a sense of unease. Convinced myself that staying inside was no longer an option, and we relocated to the safety of our truck, periodically checking the equipment remotely. Later, my journeyman attempted to rationalize the pen incident, suggesting vibrations from the equipment. However, the presence of a distinct dust ring on the pen's territory challenged this explanation. Footstep, doors opening and closing, and unexplained noises on the first floor continued to plague my experiences, leading to numerous instances where I rushed to investigate, only to find nothing there. Subsequent research revealed that the building had a multifaceted history, starting as a Cold War bomb shelter. During its initial testing phase, 3 participants were sealed inside to access on-site functionality, similar to disaster conditions. Tragically, 1 participant passed away during the first test. The deceased individual was interred in a makeshift grave, marked by dirt, peat moss, and grow lights intended for cultivating food. I lived with my now ex-boyfriend, and I had fallen asleep on the couch in the basement. It's undeveloped, and we have different areas for a movie room, laundry room, and a playroom for his young daughter. I had never fallen asleep down there before, and I was exhausted and it was 3 a.m, so I decided to just sleep instead of go up 2 flights of stairs to bed. I was more restless than usual. I kept waking up for no apparent reason every few minutes or half hour or so, and was able to tell roughly how long the sleeps were because I'd left the TV on or without sound and would fall asleep watching one show and wake up to another. I was confused as to why I kept waking up, but was extremely exhausted to really care, so I kept falling back asleep. Then one time I woke up to the sound of a semi-loud bang that had clearly come from somewhere in the basement. I sat up, looked around and didn't see anything. I thought my boyfriend may come downstairs, but it was still and silent. I go back to sleep and maybe 10 minutes later I hear it again, and immediately I hear his daughter's rocking Elmo toy start talking. I don't remember what it was saying because I was too freaked out and too busy trying to figure out what the hell was going on, but it was about 15 seconds of this fricking toy randomly making noise. I get up, turn on the light, walk around over to it, and it's just sitting there, standing with its permanently wide-eyed expression. I immediately head to bed and cuddle up to my fast-asleep boyfriend. The next morning I asked him if he was playing a trick on me or something, and he was like, no. He was dead asleep the whole time, which I believe because he was fighting off a cold and had worked late that day. I told him about what happened with Elmo, and he said that it only makes noise when you're holding onto it and rocking it back and forth. He insisted I was crazy. We lived alone except for when his daughter was there on weekends, and this wasn't a weekend. I was so freaked out, but I never went down there unless all the lights were on and it was daytime. He told me of his buddies, and then made a lot of fun of me non-stop for a week. Oh, and the Elmo voice? Hilarity to its finest to them. My daughter wanted to have a sleepover for her 10th birthday party. They all set up downstairs, and towards the end of the night, they were watching a movie. Around midnight, I was getting tired, so I got up and checked on them to see if they were all sleeping. I went upstairs to my room where my wife was already sleeping, and my door was open to the hallway. I started to get undressed, and I watched a girl with long dark hair walk from my daughter's room down the hall right past my door. I was kind of surprised considering I just saw all of them sleeping a minute before, so I stepped into the hallway and no one was there. I checked the bathroom, no one was there. I continued through the house finding no one upstairs. I thought I saw someone by the stairs, so I asked, "Did you need something?" There was no reply. I walked downstairs to see that all the kids were still sleeping. Dumbfounded, I got a super weird feeling, not scared, but disbelief that this had just happened. Did I follow a ghost into my basement? I never saw anything else in that house, but I started looking for a new house regardless after seeing that. My stepdad bought a house that was really messed up inside. There was a lot of garbage and everything like cabinets and bathrooms were broken and unusable. He got a great deal from the bank and wanted to fix it up, and after months of working on it, we moved in. One neighbor kept coming over and asking what we were doing to the house. He seemed unsure if we were staying, and it got weird because he asked my cousin a lot of if we were cool. I was a teenager, and my cousin was in his 20s. Every day the neighbor would chat with us and end with, "So you guys are cool, right?" After a few months, he asked my cousin for a favor. He used to hang out with the old residents, and he thought something might have been left behind. My cousin said the house was completely empty, but the guy insisted. Eventually, my cousin let him in to check. I thought we might get robbed, so I followed them downstairs into the half basement. The guy opened the furnace room and looked around. Then he asked again, "You guys are cool, right?" It was strange, but he squeezed around the furnace into a back wall. He slid part of it open and revealed a hidden area. My cousin and I were shocked. In the room were bags of cocaine, marijuana, and smaller things I couldn't see clearly. The guy looked scared that we had found it. He gave my cousin money to keep it quiet and then took everything away. We never said a word, but were interested in finding out about the secret space. I'm the youngest in my family, and my siblings always teased me or made fun of me or bugged me, so I wouldn't really want them around when I played. My brother, for instance, always used to dress up as Scream every year for Halloween. It was his favorite. He's 9 years older than me, and he used to wear it around the house to scare me sometimes, because that's just what Break Brothers did to their 5-year-old siblings, I suppose. One day my siblings were out with their friends, my dad at work, and it was just me and my mum at home. I was helping mum with cleaning and chores, when she asked me to put my brother's folded laundry on his bed for her, as she was starting to do the dishes. His room was in the basement. Now, I did not like the basement of our childhood home. It gave me the willies, and not in a good way. I was always petrified to be down there alone. I expressed to my mum that I didn't want to and that I was scared, and she pulled up the classic mum trick saying, "I'll time you and see how fast you can do it." I loved a good challenge, so I accepted and ran down 2 flights of stairs, opened the door to the basement, ran into my brother's room, threw his laundry on the bed, and, as I had such an uneasy feeling, slammed the door and was running back to go up the stairs. As I was going to shut the basement door, someone wearing the Scream mask was standing there. I let out a blood-curdling scream that was so loud it scared my mum, and she actually dropped the dish she was holding and came down running. I was running up the stairs crying hysterically and told my mum what happened. She yelled out to my big brother to stop playing games with me, and I knew he wasn't home. But my mum tried her best to comfort me. We smudged the house after that, and my mum told the spirit that it had to leave. There was only enough room in the house for our family, and it had to go. Nothing really happened after that. We did end up moving a year or so later into the mountains for my dad's work. Whenever I talk about it, shivers go up my spine, and that was 23 years ago now. When I was around 11 years old, I was playing basketball in an old gym with one of my friends. The gym used to be part of a high school many years ago, until it was repurposed into a community center. So there was a lower level with old classrooms and storage spaces, and I remembered I used to be afraid of the basement. So I was shooting hoops with my friend when all of a sudden we heard what sounded like kids laughing and playing behind the bleachers, and the sound seemed to be traveling from our end by the gym down to the far side, where the staircase access to the lower level was. Being curious kids, we followed the noises to the far side of the gym, where the noises stopped right in front of the stairway access. Everything was extremely silent all of a sudden. It was as if all the sound got sucked into a vacuum. I remember both of us peering through the window down into the stairwell and seeing what can only be described as a dark human figure flailing backwards down the stairs and into the darkness, as if something had pushed or pulled it away. Immediately I remembered the two of us looking at each other, confirming we had both seen the same thing, and we took off and got the hell out of there. We told the park and rec director what we had seen, and he brushed it off and didn't pay it any mind, but I'm 100,000% sure I saw something unexplainable that day. At the age of 17, I had a chilling encounter that still haunts my memories. Picture this, an abandoned warehouse basement, the clock striking 3 a.m. and a group of friends by my side in that eerie atmosphere. I found myself face to face with what seemed to be none other than a demonic figure topped with a top hat. The unearthly entity locked eyes with me, standing merely a foot away. When we went to research, we discovered that a tragic incident unfolded there in the 1900s, claiming the lives of several individuals trapped in the same basement during a fire. I don't know if it's related, but I do know that I won't be going down to that basement ever again. Growing up, my mother canned fruits and different vegetables to have fresh during the winter months. It was my job to fetch whatever she asked for. I was so nauseous just thinking about it. I would hear low voices, both male and female, as if they were overlapping conversations when heading down to the basement. Once in a great while, I might clearly hear a word here and there. A couple of times I swore I heard my name there, but they were quite low whisperings. My parents said it was my imagination, so I never brought it up again to anyone. This was my first time telling this experience, and it honestly feels good to get it out. It certainly really scared the hell out of me. Back when I was 20, I worked for an office removal company called Premier Moves, which is based in Enfield, the town known for the famous Enfield hauntings in North London. We visited many times well-known companies all around the country and saw places in London that I never knew existed. This place was one of them. I started work when all of the office staff had left for home at around 7 p.m, and our job was to move one department up the next floor, and the vacant floor was for the new people that were moving in at a later date. So I had to suffer this place for 4 nights. The building was nothing to look at, just your run-of-the-mill office block. Nearby was the fabled Gherkin. As you walked on the floor, walls and even ceilings were covered in glazed tiles, exactly the same ones used on the London Underground's Bakerloo line. Dark reds, dark greens. They were really beautiful to look at and really had the wow effect. We had to put plywood on the floor to protect the floor tiles from our equipment. While we were working, a number of the staff were working overtime, and me being a history geek, struck up a conversation with a young office woman. I asked about the strange but beautiful deco, and was informed that it was once part of the original London hospital, but due to it being a Grade 2 listed building, the exterior was built around the original structure to protect it, and only the interior modifications were carpeted in the offices to protect high heels from slipping, and plasterboard on the walls to stop damage to the tiles. I was even informed that the basement was still the original morgue table, as this was a listed structure too. My duty was to operate the service lift and take equipment up and down. Me being the skinniest at the time, I was perfect for the role. The lift was small and ran in a shaft that was very similar to the old-fashioned open shaft type with stairs running around it. Very clunky, very slow and very annoying. So the night had started like any other. I was then handed the lift key, which basically meant I had full control of the elevator, which meant that no one or anything could override my operation. I was effectively a lift boy. The first 4 hours went without a hitch, operating from the 3rd level that we were working on. We stopped for a tea break an hour before the second stint of 4 hours. We started at 10, and this was when things began to get strange. So bear in mind I have the lift key. The lift decided to go to the basement level despite me pushing G on ground level. I wasn't paying attention and walked out the lift, realizing that I wasn't at the reception, when staring back at me were cream tiles and a ceramic morgue table built into the floor, complete with drainage gullies for the blood. What the hell, I wondered. Getting back in the lift, I headed back to ground level, to which I got asked why I was in the basement. After letting them know what happened, one of the porters said it had to be a glitch, to which my supervisor said, "Glitch or not, Dan has the override key, so Dan has full control, it shouldn't happen." This is my night for the next few shifts. Hit G, went to the basement. Hit level 2, the basement. And guess what happens when you hit level 1? The basement. Each time I was greeted by the morgue table and perfect cream tiles. I have to admit I started getting used to it and it became the norm. I even started saying, "Oh, back here again." During the final hours of the last day, I felt sad to believe I had come used to it. But it was definitely a peculiar experience, almost like it wanted me to visit that area. Hey guys, it's Mort here and thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed tonight's collection of basement stories. If you did, you know what to do. On screen is a list of my amazing members and patrons who pay a little bit every month for a few perks to do with the channel. Extra stories, extra content, and other stuff. You can find out more in the links in the description if you're interested. But until then, stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.